All right. What's up, everyone? It's Andrew Bone here with BamaInsider.com. Glad to be back with you guys this week as the dead period has come to an end. So we'll talk about some of the kids that are going to be visiting Alabama this weekend. Alabama's going to have a cookout on Saturday, which we saw a vast majority of Alabama's top tier targets visit last month. We saw a ton of those guys attend the cookout. I saw a lot of them just visit throughout the entire month. And we're seeing a lot of those top guys going elsewhere this weekend, schools that they haven't seen this summer yet. So wouldn't be too discouraged about that because we're going to see a ton of official visits happen this fall. Official visits will resume in September, so we'll be keeping a close eye on that. We'll also talk about a few upcoming decisions, and then I'm going to take some questions. We got a new feature on YouTube. It's called Super Chat. So if you do have a question, you want to get your question answered quickly and first, click on that Super Chat, ask me a question, and we'll kind of go from there. All right, so. Overall, this weekend we'll see some top kids make it to Tuscaloosa. What we are gonna see is more commitments make it to Tuscaloosa, guys that haven't visited Alabama this summer. So I think that's that's a big positive, big plus for Alabama to get Drew Sanders, the Rivals 100 outside linebacker, who I think is a 5-star type player. I think a lot of other people do as well. 6'5", 215 pounds, plays quarterback, plays outside linebacker, just a tremendous athlete. Flipped from Oklahoma to Alabama back in the spring, and going to be making his first visit back to Alabama since then this weekend. So that's going to be a big visit. Trayshawn Holden, the 4-star wide receiver who originally was at St. Francis in Baltimore, now is at Narbonne High School in Harbor City, California. Actually, same high school as a big-time Alabama target, Jordan Banks, 4-star linebacker that Alabama's heavily recruiting, who visited Tuscaloosa last month. So those two guys are teammates. So getting Trayshawn Holden back on campus is huge. And I say that because he moved to the West Coast. He's been visiting some West Coast schools, has gone to UCLA, gone to USC, and has kind of, he seems like a solid commitment in my opinion. But watching the visits, you have to kind of pay close attention to that because visits are important. If you see a kid visiting a school multiple times, you have to watch that pretty closely. But I think for the most part, he's solid with his commitment, and we'll try to catch up with him after this weekend and see how things go. And we'll see a lot of other Tide commitments on campus. Javon Baker, 4-star wide receiver out of Georgia, who's had a tremendous summer. He's going to be back in Tuscaloosa. Quandarius Robinson is going to be back in Tuscaloosa, #1 player in the state of Alabama. So getting some big time commitments back in town, to help recruit some of these other guys that are going to be visiting, I think is going to be very beneficial. So who are some of the top tier targets that aren't committed to Alabama? Well, there's two guys that I would really watch out for this weekend, especially in regards to their interest level in Alabama. They visited Alabama a few times, several times. One of them was in Tuscaloosa last month. Well, actually, both of them, but one made it to Tuscaloosa last month for the first time in a long time, and the other has been a pretty frequent visitor to Alabama, and both of them are committed to other programs. So the first one, Kashan Boot, is a Rivals 100 wide receiver out of Louisiana. He's been committed to LSU for a very, very long time, but made a trip to Tuscaloosa last month, attended Alabama's camp, had a great performance down there, and really kind of became one of Alabama's top overall wide receiver targets. And Alabama's got a really good wide receiver class right now that they certainly want to add some more depth to the class and some more talent. He's one of their top tier targets. So he's coming back for the cookout on Saturday. I think he's coming in on Friday, so he's going to be in Tuscaloosa on Friday and Saturday. So I'm sure Alabama is excited about getting him back on campus. Not ready to say that he's going to flip just yet. I think Alabama's just continuing to recruit him. We're going to continue to work on him, and that he'll probably make a final decision much further down the road. I think he'll take his official visits, enjoy the process. It's always tough to flip players who are committed to LSU in the state of Louisiana. But Alabama's been able to do that. We've seen that throughout the last 10 or so years. We saw Kenny Bell do that. We saw Luther Davis do that. Dylan Moses was a longtime LSU commitment and then committed to Alabama after he reopened his recruitment. So we have seen kids from Louisiana either decommit or flip from LSU and go to Alabama throughout the last several years. So that's something to keep an eye on over the course of the next several months. Another guy that I think Alabama fans should pay very close attention to, especially this weekend, is Jamil Burrows. He's a four-star defensive lineman out of McEachern High School in Powder Springs, Georgia. Same high school as Alabama commitment Javon Baker. This is going to be his second time coming to Alabama's cookout this summer. He attended the first cookout. He made 3 or 4 stops in Tuscaloosa during the spring. I know he was at junior day. He came to a spring practice. I mean, there is a lot of interest there. And it seems like his commitment to Georgia is starting to fade a little bit. And I could easily see him possibly flipping over his commitment to Alabama this weekend. So that's the one kid that I wouldn't say I'm expecting him to commit, but I would watch him extremely close this weekend. So Jamil Burrows, 4-star defensive lineman. Alabama picked up a huge defensive line commitment last week from Timothy Smith. And you look at Alabama's defensive line class right now, and they've got McKinley Jackson. They've got Timothy Smith, Jamarian Latham, and Jason Jones. 3 really good defensive line commitments. But they're still going after some more guys, and I think Jamil Burrows is certainly one of the kids that they would take a commitment from and accept his commitment early on. And with some other guys that are still out there, and this is probably why I said McKinley Jackson earlier. McKinley Jackson's still out there. They're still heavily recruiting him, along with several other defensive tackles that are out there. Jacoby and Guillory. Now, I think one of the defensive linemen is going to come off the board this week. Jacqueline Roy, the Rivals 100 defensive lineman out of Baton Rouge, is going to be announcing his commitment tomorrow on Friday, July the 26th. I think he's going to pick LSU. I think that's probably the foregone conclusion for most people that he's going to pick LSU. Between Alabama, LSU, and Texas A&M, I don't think his recruitment's going to be completely over. I think he'll still take his official visits down the road, enjoy the process a little bit more, but I think he's ready to go ahead and commit, and I think it's going to be LSU. So that's going to eliminate one of Alabama's top defensive line targets, but there's a lot of other top guys that they're heavily recruiting. So another kid that I'll mention real quick is Kyle Edwards, 4-star running back out of Destrehan High School in Louisiana. Going to be expected to make his way back up to Tuscaloosa. So, Alabama has one running back commitment, an outstanding running back commitment, Roydell Williams out of Hueytown High School. Certainly one of Alabama's top commitments in their recruiting class, and number 2 overall player in the state of Alabama, behind Quandarius Robinson. Kyle Edwards certainly somebody that they have very high interest in. 6 foot, 205 pounds. Very impressive back. Set behind John Emery, big time running back that signed with LSU last year. So he's taking over the full reins this year. So should have a very productive senior season. With Alabama right now, I think they're probably going to take 2 running backs in this class. I don't know if they're going to take 3. I think 3 would be pushing it, but I definitely believe they're going to take 2. And obviously, we've talked about Zachary Evans, the 5-star running back out of Houston, North Shore High School. We talked about him a lot, and most people know that he's right up there at the top of Alabama's recruiting board. I think Zachary Evans is probably going to commit before the season starts. That's just my feeling. Not really certain, and he certainly hasn't said he's going to commit before the season starts. But I think he will. at least make a commitment, and then continue to take visits during the fall, take all of his official visits, and enjoy the process. So it's going to be a long way to go with him. Regardless of where he ends up committing on, well, I'd say on, he does not have a commitment date, but if he does commit sometime in August, it's still a long way to go. I don't think he'll make a final decision until December or February, whenever he does decide to sign. So you got to recruit some other backs just in case. And Kyle Edwards, certainly a kid that Alabama has recruited for a long time. They've kept in contact with him almost every single day. So that should say a lot about him in terms of Alabama's interest level. So I would keep an eye on Kyle Edwards. And then, Zachary Evans, as I just kind of mentioned, who knows what he's going to end up doing this weekend. There's some talk of him visiting Georgia. There's some talk of him maybe slipping into Alabama and checking out Tide once again. He was in Tuscaloosa last month. Maybe he goes to Texas A&M as well. So, we'll just have to wait and see. I don't think anyone for certain knows what he's going to do. He may not even know for certain what he's going to do just yet. So just be patient. We'll keep everything pretty updated on BamaInsider.com. So stay tuned to my recruiting board on there throughout. From now until next week, we'll have all the information on there in terms of who's made it to town, who didn't make it to town, where all of Alabama's other top targets ended up visiting. So be sure to stay tuned to that. All right, so who are some of the other guys that are making decisions soon? We talked about Jacqueline Roy earlier, making his decision on Friday, and like I said, I think he's going to be picking LSU. Another kid who's going to be making a commitment here pretty soon is Kendall Milton, the 5-star running back out of California. He's going to be committing, I believe, on Monday, July the 29th. We know that he's visited Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, LSU. I think he's going to pick Georgia. I think he's got the best relationship with the coaching staff there. Seems extremely high on them. And, based on every single interview that we've seen, it certainly seems like that's the way that he is leaning. So I've got Jacqueline Roy going to LSU. I'm picking Kendall Milton to go to Georgia. So another kid that I would watch out for, of course, it could happen in the next, 7 days, maybe in the next, it could happen today. You never know when some of these kids may pop. Is Cam Large. He's a 3-star tight end out of Massachusetts. Looks like he's going to be committing here pretty soon. Alabama, Wisconsin seems like the top 2 schools for him. Alabama really looking for tight ends in this year's class. Now they do have Caden Clark committed, but still recruiting some of these big-time 5-star guys that we've talked about a lot. Darnell Washington out of Las Vegas, Erik Gilbert out of Marietta, Georgia. 2 big-time guys that have been on Alabama's radar for a very long time. In my opinion, Alabama has to get 2 tight ends in this class. I just think that it's a priority. It's a necessity. They do have Caden Clark committed, but do you go ahead and take a guy like Cam Large and then just hope for a guy like Darnell Washington or Erik Gilbert down the road? I think you can. I think with Alabama they can do that because those 2 guys are special type players that you always hold a spot for. You may have met your needs at the position, but you still can get more players there. So that may be something that they do. We'll see. I think that Alabama really likes Cam Large a lot, and I saw him at the 5-star challenge in Atlanta last month, and it looked really good. I think he could be a good H-back. He seems like a really strong kid, good blocking tight end. Kind of remind me of Hell Henches a little bit, from the little bit that I saw of him. So that's probably my player comparison for him. So those are some guys that are going to be announcing their commitments here pretty soon that we're watching, waiting to see kind of what happens with those guys. All right, so I'm going to take a few questions here, scroll through here, see what all y'all are asking me for today. All right, Adam, is it basically a foregone conclusion that Morton will decommit? Xavier Morton, 4-star defensive back, been committed to Alabama for such a long time. Yeah, I think so. I don't expect him in this class. He may have already even decommitted and just not publicly gone with it yet. It still says on his Twitter profile that he's an Alabama commitment, but hasn't visited Alabama in a while. has been talking up some other schools on Twitter, and I just expect him not to be in Alabama's class now. As we kind of saw yesterday, we had a post on our recruiting board about Xavier Alford, 4-star safety out of Texas that we've all been saying he's going to commit soon. He's just kind of waiting for the right moment to do it. It seems like he is starting to look at some other schools. He's going to Texas A&M this weekend, and I think one of the reasons why he is because he told someone that Alabama has 5 safety commitments. Well, Alabama does not have 5 safety commitments at all. So that information is coming from somewhere. So it seems like that information is coming from, maybe one of the other programs that's heavily recruiting him. I'm not sure how someone thinks Alabama has 5 safety commitments. I think Alabama has 2 safety commitments with Brian Branch and Christian Story. Christian Story recruited mainly as an athlete though, so we list him more as an athlete than a safety because he could play quarterback, play safety, could play corner, could play wide receiver. Alabama just doesn't know which position he's going to play it. So, and then you look at some of these other guys, Malachi Moore, Jaquez Robinson, 2 guys that are being recruited mainly as cornerbacks in Alabama's recruiting class, and then Xavier Morton, who, as I've mentioned several times, I don't think he's going to end up in this class. So, and I think he's rated as a cornerback anyway. So. Somebody's telling some of these recruits that that Alabama has 5 safety commitments, which is just completely false. So not sure where they're getting that from, but in my opinion, Alabama only has 4 DB commitments, 1 true safety, 1 kid is recruited as an athlete, and 2 guys who are recruited as cornerbacks. All right, let's look. Alabama needs a 5-star DB. Well, I think Alabama's pretty happy with the guys that they have committed. Who cares if it's a 5-star? Who cares? It's a 4-star. Eddie Jackson was a 3-star. I mean, I don't think anybody cared about that. When he committed. So I wouldn't worry too much about whether a kid's rated a 5-star or 4-star or whatever. If Alabama wants the kid, if they recruit him heavily and feel like they fit their criteria, then that's all that should matter. Do I think that Seth McLaughlin stays in this class? Absolutely. Very, very impressive offensive lineman, center that Alabama recruited and committed to Alabama over Clemson. And I 100% think he is a lock to stay in Alabama's class. I don't think he's wavering at all. Bone, why does it seem like UGA coaches are out recruiting ours? I don't think that's the case. They may be getting a lot of 5-stars on campus this weekend. Alabama had a lot of 5-stars on campus last month. And you look at Alabama's recruiting class right now, they're currently the number 2 recruiting class in the country. I mean, Georgia's obviously doing a tremendous job. They're going to be, they're going to challenge for the number 1 overall class, and they're going to be challenging for the number 1 overall class, here on out. It's the same with Alabama, same with LSU, same with Ohio State, same with Clemson. I mean, Alabama is not going to be the runaway favorite for the number 1 recruiting class every single year. And I think Alabama fans and fans in general are just going to have to get used to that. It makes recruiting a lot more fun for probably other schools and other fan bases, but I think it drives up some more interest from Alabama fans in terms of what's happening, because for the last, I'd say 5 or 6 years, every time I see somebody out, people will come up to me and say, "Oh, I don't follow recruiting that much anymore because I just know that Alabama's going to sign the number 1 class and not worried about it." Well, now that's not necessarily the case. Alabama is being challenged by some of these other top programs throughout the country. There's no doubt Alabama's going to sign a tremendous recruiting class this year, but so is LSU, so is Clemson, so is Georgia. And it's going to be fun watching this all the way up until signing day, because a lot of these top tier guys that are still out there for Alabama, that are still out there for Georgia, Clemson, whoever, they're all it seems like they're all deciding between these programs. So I think it's going to be a wild race to the finish line. And I told somebody this the other day, and I think I may have said this on our YouTube show last week. It shouldn't matter if you finish with the number 1 class or the number 2 class. If you finish with a top 5, top 7 recruiting class in the country, you should be challenging for going to the playoffs, challenge for national championships. You shouldn't have to have the number one recruiting class in the country, just to play in the national championship. If you get these guys on campus, you coach them up well. And it's not just one recruiting class; it's multiple recruiting classes combined. So I think Alabama is doing quite well on the recruiting front still. I mean, obviously they've got a great class right now. They had a tremendous class last year, one of the best Nick Saban's ever put together. So I think Alabama's just fine. I don't see Alabama really being out recruited by other programs. There are some kids that chosen Clemson or chosen Georgia or whoever it may be over Alabama, but plenty of kids who Alabama has signed to that are choosing Alabama over those programs as well. Any word on Desmond Evans out of North Carolina, big defensive end? Not really. I mean, I know Alabama's still recruiting him. He has a top 10. Alabama's included. He's going to announce a top 5, I think, sometime in August. Maybe Alabama's still going to be on that list. I think they will be. I know they're heavily recruiting him. They would certainly love to have him in this class. He's one of those kids that is pretty quiet on the recruiting front, doesn't really say a ton. Even when you get him in person, we've seen some interviews with him in person. He kind of gives you those one-word answers that sometimes you try to pull more out of them. It's kind of tough to do. So we'll just have to wait and see. Just one of those kids that we'll just have to kind of keep an eye on and see what happens. Hunter Ketchum is asking about cornerback targets. Right now, Nadab Joseph, Ethan Pouncey, Joel Williams. Joel Williams does have a commitment date. I think it's September the 8th or 9th. I think it's the 8th. He's going to be announcing his commitment then. I think Alabama's in really good shape there. They still have, like I said, they're heavily recruiting Nadab Joseph and Ethan Pouncey at cornerback. I don't know how many more guys they're going to take corner. I know they're going to take at least one, but probably two. If they get the right guy. So those are probably the 3 main cornerback targets. And as we mentioned earlier, Xavier Alford still heavily in the mix for Alabama, but being recruited as a safety. Thoughts on Justin Flo? Seems like Clemson leads. I had a chance to spend some time with Justin Flo last month at the Rivals 5-star event. I couldn't really get a feeling which way he's leaning. I think he's going to enjoy the recruiting process, take all of his official visits. Now, he does have an official visit to Alabama on September the 20th. That could really open the door there for Alabama because he hasn't been to Tuscaloosa since last summer. And I think that Alabama has a chance to really get back involved with him. Now, I think Clemson's in it. I think Georgia's in it. He does like even though USC is not really performing at a high level, the last couple of years, they're still in it because he grew up a USC fan. He likes Oregon. So he's going to take all of his official visits, let it play out. But he is going to Clemson this weekend. So, yeah, I mean, they're definitely a school that he likes a lot. Are either one of the 5-star tight ends leaning towards Bama more than the other, or are they pretty even? Well, I think Erik Gilbert, he took an official visit to Alabama last month, but in my opinion, I think he's probably more of a Georgia-Tennessee battle right now. Being in Georgia and at Marietta, certainly a kid that likes Georgia a lot and has been to Athens more than probably anywhere else. Now, one of his closest friends, his teammate, his quarterback, Harrison Bailey, is committed to Tennessee, and he's been to Tennessee a bunch as well. So I think those are probably the 2 schools that are fighting very hard for him. Now, Darnell Washington has been to Alabama twice, in the last 6 months. So there's a lot of interest there. He's not going to be making it to Tuscaloosa this weekend, but he was in Tuscaloosa last month. I definitely think that Alabama is very high on his list. probably a ways to go with his recruitment. I mean, he likes a lot of schools. I mean, he likes Alabama a lot, likes Miami, likes Georgia, likes Clemson, likes Tennessee. I mean, there's a lot of schools that are very high on him. As long as Alabama can get an official visit, which I believe they will, I think they've got a really good shot at him, especially with a very big need at tight end in this year's class. The way that they've been able to develop tight ends, especially with guys like Irv Smith and O.J. Howard. I think that that resonates with him a good bit, and I think that they've done a very good job recruiting him with Jeff Banks, the tight ends coach, and so we'll obviously keep a very close eye on him in the upcoming months. But yeah, Alabama's very high on Darnell Washington's list, so I'd probably lean more towards Darnell Washington being more of a lean to Alabama than Gilbert right now. All right, let's keep on going here. Zachary Evans, what's the latest on him? We kind of hit on him a little bit earlier. Just saying, I think that there's a good chance that he could make a decision before the start of his senior season. I think it's probably more Alabama, Texas A&M right now, and we know that Texas A&M wasn't in his top 5 last month or 2 months ago when he announced the top 5, but I think now that they're very much involved in it. I know he likes LSU a good bit as well, but I think those are probably his top 3 schools. I think Alabama's probably in really good shape with him, but it's going to be a long way to go. Even if he announces next month, still a long way to go with him. All right. Anything new on Bryce Young? I think landing him or another great offensive prospect will enhance others to commit. Well, I wouldn't bank on Bryce Young committing anytime soon. I think if he ends up flipping from USC to Alabama, it's going to be much further down the road. So I would just kind of wait on him. I mean, there's not a ton of offensive targets that they're still. I mean, there are, but in terms of there's more defensive guys that they're still recruiting than offensive guys. I mean, they're trying to get Bryce Young. Trying to get a running back, and if you get Zach Evans on board, that's going to be huge. They're obviously trying to get one of the 5-star tight ends, but I don't think Darnell Washington's going to make a decision anytime soon. Pretty much done on offensive line. I mean, there's still some guys that they're heavily recruiting, but I just don't see them getting another offensive lineman at this time. All right, let's see. UGA visitor list is very impressive. It is. So is Clemson's. Alabama's list last month was, pretty much all those guys visited Alabama last month. Let's see. Who is my favorite player in this class? Hard to say. I mean, there's a ton of really great players. I really like, some of the guys on the defensive side of the ball. Drew Sanders, I think he's a special talent. Quindarius Robinson, same way. On offense, I really like Roydell Williams. I think he's, reminds me so much of Josh Jacobs coming out of high school. I think he's a tremendous player and can be a very exciting back in Tuscaloosa. Is there any top prospects who could flip? Well, there's a few. We mentioned a few guys earlier, 2 guys that are going to be visiting Alabama this weekend. Kashan Boot is committed to LSU, and then Jamil Burrows, the 4-star defensive lineman who's committed to Georgia, is going to be making it to Tuscaloosa this weekend. I think what we're going to have to wait and see is who ends up visiting during the fall. What kind of happens at other schools. Will coordinators leave and become head coaches somewhere? Will position coaches leave and become coordinators somewhere? I think that you got to watch that pretty closely because that can really affect some recruits and make them want to take visits elsewhere, including maybe a place like Alabama. So you have to kind of wait for that to happen. But those are some of the top guys, along with Bryce Young, as we mentioned earlier, in terms of top kids who are very interested in Alabama that are currently committed elsewhere. Savell Smalls, he's got a very interesting recruitment because he doesn't really say a lot. Now, he'll tweet when he's somewhere, and I think he's at Florida State this weekend, but it hasn't really said if he's going anywhere else. I don't see him in Alabama's class. Do I see him visiting Alabama, I do. Probably for an official visit, but in terms of does Alabama lead for him? As some people have hinted, I don't see that as the case at all. I don't think Alabama's in the driver's seat. I think he's a long shot. Alabama's got a tremendous outside linebacker, edge rusher type class so far, and I think they're even though they would still take a commitment from Savell Smalls. I think they're very excited about what they've got right now, and they're still heavily recruiting Philip Webb out of Georgia. Certainly a top priority for them. So I think Smalls will end up going somewhere else. Mr. Birch, Jordan Birch. Yeah, I mean, the number 3 overall player in the country, visited Alabama last month. He's got a great relationship with the coaching staff, but definitely one of those kids that doesn't say a whole lot. A lot of people think that that South Carolina is is in strong position for him, but I think Alabama's also in there. I think Georgia's also in there. He's going to visit Clemson and Georgia this week. Interesting that he hadn't visited Clemson since January, so that's going to be his first visit to Clemson since January. Now he has made multiple visits to Georgia, and is going back down there on Saturday, I believe. But he was at Alabama last month and has developed a very strong relationship with the coaching staff, including the defensive line coach Brian Baker. I think he'll take his official visits this fall and then make a decision. But yeah, Alabama's very much in the mix with him. All right, guys, that's a little bit over 30 minutes. We're only going to do about 30 minutes today, but that's it. Hope you enjoyed the show. And I mentioned this last time. Anyone's interested in doing a sponsorship of the show, you want to see you want me to mention your company ever on the show, contact me. Hit me up at Andrew J. Bone on Twitter. You can find me at BamaInsider.com, which is part of the Rivals.com network. We'll try to catch up next week on the YouTube channel, talk about what happened at the cookout this weekend, and then we're going to have everything on BamaInsider.com on my recruiting board this weekend. Everything that's going down, so any commitments, any big news, any new offers, everything's going to be on there. So check us out, and hope you guys have a great rest of the week and have a great weekend. Thanks a lot.